I think so. Yeah, it has a little.
It does have the little thing. Okay, so I think we're recording. Okay. And do you know if this was set up where it has a waiting room? Let me just double check. It doesn't look like it.
It doesn't look like it.
Okay, so I think we're okay.
Then I'm ready whenever you're
You're
ready.
ready? All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here today. This is our last fable of this semester, but not by far our last fable for the academic year. In fact, we have one. We'll send out some more information about this soon, actually before the break, so that you can get it on your calendar, and then a reminder right as we get back, because we actually have a fable talk scheduled for. It's the Friday of the first week of class, right, Dana? Okay, so we'll make sure that you all have that info so that you can get it on your calendar and not be surprised when it comes up that second week of January. And in fact, some of you may have received emails from Dana Moot. If you don't know him, Dana's right over there. He is organizing the fables for the spring. We've got a couple of fantastic guests who will be joining us from outside the department. And so I definitely encourage you to come, and they're both anthropologists in other departments at the University of Alabama. So it's really an outstanding opportunity to get to know about some anthropology work, which is happening more broadly at UA. And then we also have some students signed up already, but I believe there are still open spaces. Is that right? Yeah. So if you haven't yet, I highly encourage you, if you're one of the grad students in the room, I highly encourage you to get in touch with Dana and sign up for a fable talk. Remember, it does not have to be a polished, final, finished product. This is why we have this series the way we do, designed the way we do, in order to allow space for workshopping ideas and, generally presenting preliminary results, as well as things that might be further along. So, you can be presenting ideas. It doesn't have to be even what you would present at a conference, let alone a finalized thesis or dissertation or something like that. So as I say, if this potentially applies to you and you haven't already done one of these, please consider contacting Dana and getting it scheduled. So with that, let me move on to our speaker for today. So Cynthia Hannold is a doctoral student in our program who has been working for the last couple of years in Guatemala, a theology doctoral student. And I will let her speak for herself about the topic of her presentation. So thank you so much, Cynthia, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Jason. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, like you said, my name is Cynthia Hannold. As of this week, I am a third-year doctoral candidate in the program. It's been a big week. I started with a proposal defense, and now I'm ending with fable talk. I want to thank all of you for coming, but especially these two in front. It's Cole's birthday today, so happy birthday, Cole. And I would like to thank my partner, Mason Booth, for coming, because he usually doesn't get to see me give conference style presentations. So thank you for making it over here, although he may have to sneak out for another meeting. I'm going to start with an introduction to one of these. Okay, I'm going to start with an introduction to our 2022 field season, and then I'll kind of give an overview of the political landscape in the Maya lowlands, as well as Teotihuacan style in the Maya area. What does that even mean? Before moving on to artifacts recovered from La Sufricaya, specifically structure 51. So in the summer of 2022, our research team arrived at the Hannold base camp, and over the course of more than a month, we conducted excavations in several areas, including the main plaza, the lower plaza, as well as structure 151, which is located about halfway in between Hannold and La Sufricaya. Here we have us arriving, that's first day there. Here we have us leaving, that's the last day there. As you can see, we got much more serious loss of significant amount of weight and look pretty tired. And Dana is missing from this photo. As one of my master's committee members said, you lost one. But Dr. Cahigas also joined our research team while we were there to conduct a magnetometry at La Sufricaya, and these data were used to then identify anomalies, which were then tested via excavations, and surprise, yielded some pretty cool things. So stay tuned for Joseph Dober's master's thesis for that data. And overall, the excavations were rewarding and at times puzzling, including fun things like where the heck is the corner of the stairway? And also for those of you in the know, Clara Alexander's silica gel experiments, which ask me about those videos sometime. So the site of La Sufricaya is located 1.2 kilometers west of Hannold. This site right here at the top. The actual like got cut off, but that's Hannold. This is La Sufricaya, and then right in the center there is where structure 151 is. The classic period was a time of intense transformation in the area. So the royal residence was actually moved to La Sufricaya, and this new construction period corresponds with the arrival of Teotihuacanos in the area, La Entrada de Teotihuacan. The early classic period is a period of intense cultural interaction between Teotihuacan and many Maya polities. Visual documentation of Maya and Teotihuacan sites demonstrates the transition of imagery between the two regions. Maya murals, ceramics, and inscriptions have been found at Teotihuacan. And likewise, Teotihuacan architecture, inscriptions, and murals have been identified in the Maya area. My dissertation research looks at those technologies that specifically apply Maya Teotihuacan relationships to a more practice-based theory. So, for example, not just what things should look like, but also how they should be done. And I do this through a study of lithics and lime plaster. During the period of 250 to 550 CE, elites of several Maya polities declared political and cultural allegiance to Teotihuacan. At the center of this research is a debate between two views, internalist versus externalist models of Teotihuacan Maya interaction. The externalist view, which was posited earlier on, says that this Teotihuacan Maya interaction was primarily militaristic and characterized by political domination. The internalist perspective, however, suggests that Teotihuacan visual and technological style was adopted as a means for legitimizing political control. Visual textual data support the externalist view, though much of the record supports the internalist view. David Stewart, who is a big part of this discussion in archaeology and epigraphy, argues that externalist and internalist views shouldn't be seen as dichotomous, and that they in fact have equal explanatory value at different points in time. So the externalist view earlier on and the internalist view later. However, recent archaeological excavations have found that Maya and Teotihuacan had bidirectional relationships even prior to the Entrada. So that adds another layer onto this. You know, where originally we had kind of this conquistador-esque Teotihuacanos coming into the area, you know, idea of this relationship. Now we see that Teotihuacan and Maya sites were not only aware of each other, but had complex social and political relations prior. So now that I've introduced you to Teotihuacan and Maya relationships and why that matters, I'm going to introduce you to style in a quick and dirty, very brief way. So what do I mean when I say Teotihuacan style? And this is going to feel a little bit repetitive to my wonderful committee members. But during its history, style has been used in a number of ways. I'm going to just briefly describe some of the most important aspects of style theory and how it relates to my research. Michelle Hagman, one of my archaeological heroes, best summarizes the archaeological consensus on style, citing that it is both a way of doing and that it involves a choice. A lot of debate around style has centered on active versus passive style. So the real difference here is intentionality. Both active and passive style were important to identity studies because they offer discrete methods at which we can look at how technological behavior manifests in the material record. Second, another big figure in this debate suggests that not all style is meant to convey information and refers to other than iconological style as isochrestic variation. There's also a big push for understanding style by understanding what stylistic behavior is in the record. And it's important to note that while most definitions of style do in fact include a choice, that not always is that conscious choice going to be made consciously. It could be made consciously once, and then as it becomes part of practice, it becomes part of those deeply embedded technical routines of the chaîne opératoire, which is a fancy word for chain of operation. Another thing to point out here is that style and technological style, though often used interchangeably, are in fact different concepts. Where style represents cultural patterning, technological style includes all of the behaviors, attitudes, and choices that go into the production of an object as a whole. The choices are non-random, and according to Lechman, their expression is emic. Technological style does not mean that a culture is defined by a single style, or that they are only trying to communicate one message. Instead, many different styles can operate simultaneously. Dietler and Herbich's 1998 work is also important because they're looking at style as a product of practice. They argue for a distinction between thing and technique, or object versus practice. And they differentiate this by style of action, which is the techniques or the way of doing things, and material style, which is the actual patterning on the material. So now on to what evidence do we actually have of Teotihuacan style at La Sufricaya? The first group of evidence comes from Pachuca obsidian blades. And obsidian blades are very, very important throughout Mesoamerica, but Teotihuacan isn't the only one who had this type of technology. The Maya also had this technology. The important thing to note here is the actual source of the stone. Obsidian sourcing is one of the most productive activities in stone, studies of stone tools, because it can inform social and political connections across space and time in a way that we might not otherwise be able to see these connections. Pachuca obsidian is from the Sierra Las Navajas source in Hidalgo, Mexico, and it's unique in relation to its neighboring obsidian sources because of its color. And as you can see here, it has this green color. This is an image of Pachuca prismatic blades from the Austin collection, which is actually housed here at the University of Alabama, and it comes from Teotihuacan. I chose this picture because you can see the color a little bit better than in the photos of La Sufricaya prismatic blades from this season. Green obsidian has been found primarily in the form of prismatic blades at La Sufricaya, However, they've also recovered in structure one, which is the palatial structure. They also recovered 2 point fragments made out of green obsidian as well. It has continued to be recovered this field season as well. In fact, the majority of the excavations that we conducted revealed green obsidian blades this summer. The second line of evidence is pretty cool. I'm actually glad Alex isn't here so that he can't see me butcher this. But murals were identified during excavations at the early classic palatial structure. This is where they actually found the Pachuca obsidian point fragments as well. The mural most relevant to our discussion is located right here at mural 7. And it includes an inscription referencing historical events. And one of these events that it's referencing is the arrival of Teotihuacan at Tikal in 11 Eb 15, which is January 16th, CE 378. So that's the date of the Teotihuacan arrival, and it's celebrating the 1-year anniversary of this. And this is a big deal to have this kind of reference here. It also shows that even in non-public spaces, you know, this is a private royal residence, that they're still, you know, celebrating Teotihuacan. The architecture of La Sufricaya is also important to, you know, kind of see this central Mexico connection. Talud tablero architecture, there is some back and forth on whether the kind of Talud tablero we're seeing in Guatemala, etc., is actually the Talud tablero architecture of Teotihuacan. As you can see right here in this schematic, it's very distinct. You have, you know, these kind of slopes. This is a drawing from exploration of a looter's trench in structure 151 in, I believe, 2017 or 2018. We actually continued these excavations. Joseph was actually in charge of excavations at structure 151 and found that this Talud tablero architecture actually continued all the way down. We almost found the corner, or we did find the corner. We never found the corner. We were close. We know we were close. But, you know, even though there is some debate over Talud tablero architecture and whether it is in fact indicative of Teotihuacan presence, it's still commonly used as a marker of Teotihuacan style. And now we've come to the true purpose of my talk and my true love. Sorry, Mason. Stone tools. So what do Teotihuacan lithic technologies look like, and how can we identify that in the record? These are 2 separate tools that were located during excavations. This is a drill, and this, I believe, came from maybe Dana's excavation of the residential group. I think this is one of your drills. And then this is another point that I will show. It's actually a fragment of a point. I'll show that in just a sec. So let's go to Teotihuacan first. This image right here is from Carballo's work at Teotihuacan. And he was looking at implements of militaristic and state power. And so a lot of the focus in his research is on points and projectile points. This next image is actually from the Austin collection, which I alluded to earlier with those prismatic blades. The Austin collection is housed here at the University of Alabama. It was a collection donated by a very far in the past professor who was an avid collector and brought back a lot of the things that he collected when he was in the city of Mexico. I know. But the main thing to to look at here is similarities between these two, and then also the kind of thinner base right here. Also, the platform is completely knocked away. Then we have points from within the Maya area. These are from Caracal. All of these blades in this image are made from green obsidian. And as you can see right here at the bottom, these two kind of look a little bit wonky, and they were interpreted as those points actually being used to stir a fire for the cremation of an individual that they were associated with. I've never seen melted obsidian like that. Very interesting. Had to have been really hot. So now let's talk about the lithics of La Sufricaya. Ara Barrientos conducted excavations at structure 151, or at structure 51 this season. And she recovered the 3 points that I'm going to discuss. I'll describe each in detail shortly, but I want to kind of go through some of the terminology that may be necessary as I'm talking about these 3 points. When I say bifacially flaked, I mean that it has been worked on both sides. When I say perverse fracture, I mean that, so a bending fracture, of course, there's no marker for me to do this, but a perverse fracture, you have one? Okay, I will wait, because this is much easier to demonstrate in an image. Thank you. Oh, this is from the field. So a bending fracture, if you have a point like this, a bending fracture pretty much goes right through. And this is the product of too much pressure being applied on one side or another, when usually during production. It's really, really easy to do this during the final stages of production. A perverse fracture is actually very common during use. And it's a little bit more curved, similar to a hinge termination for a plate. And one of the point fragments that I have that I'll talk about in a minute actually exhibits the perverse fracture instead. It's a combination of bending and torsion, so multiple forces are being applied. That's why they break that way. So the first point, this is the first point recovered during the excavations. Immediately, some of the workers thought that it had Teotihuacan style, and so kind of got excited about that. Turns out not really. However, that did kind of, crazy enough, lead to the discovery of actual Teotihuacan style points. So this is made from a rose pink colored shirt and just over 5 centimeters long. One side is slightly thicker at the shoulder, and this style is actually similar to points recovered from Petén. The second point, this is the point that was broken via a perverse fracture, so a combination of bending and torsion. This point tip is approximately 4 centimeters long. And the form and the flake scars of this point fragment are similar to the next, and in fact are so similar that when I was doing the drawings of them, I was able to overlay them, and they're actually possibly 2 very, very similar style points that were made in association. They're also made out of the same materials. And here is the final point. This is perhaps the most important as it demonstrates the closest similarities to Teotihuacan style. This spear point is 12 centimeters long. It exhibits bifacial flaking Macro points throughout the Maya area are large like this. However, they do not typically have this extent of flaking. They don't demonstrate much of the kind of later stage production flaking. This point stem is angular rather than rounded, and is actually more similar to points found at Tikal. Tikal also had quite a bit of Teotihuacan, quite a bit of history with Teotihuacan as well. I posit, however, that the reason that the base on this point isn't rounded like the other ones from Caracol is because the platform is actually right here on the end. And because it's a 90-degree angle, that's actually really, really hard to get into. It's possible that they could have taken this off a little bit, but everything else is pretty square. While we were excavating at La Sufricaya, another team was excavating at Xochitlam. These excavations recovered another point. This point is made from obsidian, has an asymmetrical stem, and does exhibit some similarities to Teotihuacan style points. However, I don't have enough data to support that this would be considered Teotihuacan style. It also resembles many points throughout the Maya area. It's just under 6.5 centimeters. So in addition to my stone hole research, I'm also exploring lime plaster technology. Teotihuacan developed a distinct lime plaster technology between 350 and 450 CE. And this is characterized by the addition of volcanic ash. Lime plaster has been discussed, this specific lime plaster has been discussed as a marker of shared cultural identity and is in fact found throughout the Maya lowlands. Though work on this has been kind of limited and inconclusive so far. Through a comparison of lime plaster from the Hannold region and Teotihuacan, I'm exploring the extent of Teotihuacan influence in Maya plasters. The lime plaster recipe includes the addition of volcanic ash, and this type of material is typically called pozzolanic or hydraulic. The higher quality plaster has a tighter structure because of the addition of this material. There's actually a chemical reaction that happens when you add volcanic ash. And so it makes it more water resistant, more resistant to mechanical weathering processes, and it lasts longer compared to other lime plasters around it. Previous investigations of the stucco layer of the murals that I referenced earlier actually found that those stucco layers that have the murals on them include volcanic ash. So we do know that this material made it to La Sufricaya, but I'm exploring to what extent it made it to La Sufricaya. Is it only in these, thin stucco layers on the outside, or is it also being included in actual construction materials rather than just art? So during the 2022 field season, with some help of some amazing Guatemaltecos, I gathered samples from ritual and residential contexts at La Sufricaya, Hannold, and Xochitlam. These samples arrived in Alabama in October, and I'm currently in the process of getting them prepared for XRF, optical spectrometry, and then sending them off to be thin section to do petrographic analysis as well. And I would just like to note this photo, which is one of my favorite photos from the field. Joseph looking very amused at something that Clara said, and Dana looking very skeptical. And that's all I have for now. Are there any questions? Yes, Dana. Yeah, so recently, talking to Alex, there's been some work with the addition of volcanic materials into pottery. And so there is in fact a source, I think Alex said it was 40 kilometers from Hannold. And it's possible that the volcanic ash was coming from there. Of course, there's no immediate sources, which is why we lack obsidian in comparison to other more easily accessible materials in the area. But it is possible to get it. But it would be absolutely bringing it in from, you know, another source, extra labor, et cetera. Okay, Rachel.
For the geographic analysis, are you primarily making the presence or absence of volcanic ash, or are there other geographic characteristics that you're exploring?
So I'm also interested in exploring whether there are certain organic materials and whether the presence of those organic materials is sufficient to say they were added purposefully. Because of course, you know, you're in an open environment, leaves are falling, things are falling. And so they could get added accidentally, but at Rio Beck, there's the possibility that they didn't have access to volcanic ash anymore. And so they were experimenting to try to get similar reactions with different materials, including organic materials. So there's a number of different things that I'm looking for there, as well as what type of limestone they're adding to see if maybe we can nail down specific sources. Because, you know, the karstic landscape changes, which is also why we're including XRF and perhaps another elemental analysis method as well to get at that. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Austin collection?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with Austin. You say he was a professor here. What was he doing?
It has been, so I did this project where I analyzed these with XRF in 2020. I feel like he was a biology professor. It has been a while. I could look at my report that I gave because it has a little bit more detail into the background of the actual collection. But it was, I think I'm thinking like 1950s, 60s, where he was, you know, doing this collecting, and his wife worked in central Mexico. No, he wasn't digging. He would take walks while waiting for his wife to finish what she was doing, and he would just find them in surface collections and pick them up and take them home.
And this is all the Alabama Museum of Natural History.
No, it's actually here in collections. They're basically unprovenience. It's an unprovenience teaching collection. Unprovenience in that we don't have actual GPS data for anything in it. We just know where he was collecting it.
It's right. How it ended up in the park.
It was donated. He might have felt that later. It was donated to like he was in fact a professor here, but he donated it to the anthropology department when he retired.
I think it is accession to the museum, though, correct?
Is it?
I think so.
Okay.
Isn't that stuff to allow us and stuff every year to inventory and make sure it's listed here?
I don't remember him coming up for that. I remember him coming up for the Moundville stuff, but I don't know, maybe it is part of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Very long term. Dana. Yes. That's a very, very good question. And I would actually say that it's likely Teotihuacanos making their style of points We do know that there were Teotihuacanos at the site of La Sufricaya. It wasn't just that Hannold had an affiliation. There were likely Teotihuacanos living at the site. Structure 51, I think, is what demonstrates the biggest presence. Maybe that's where these Teotihuacanos were. But I actually also had a section in notes that I couldn't access because my computer died, that talked about how, if craftspeople are coming from Teotihuacan and they're used to working with obsidian, and then they end up in an area with exclusively or almost exclusively chert. Yes, the production activities are similar. Yes, the crystalline structure makes knapping similar. However, somebody who's worked exclusively with obsidian may find it more difficult to work with cherts. They're a little bit less predictable sometimes, depending on the source. So that could actually account for some of the kind of trouble areas, or why they didn't round out the base of that point, because they didn't have necessarily. Yes.
Trying to envision how this multiple practice works, needing to bring in cash to make plaster. And the distance involved, yeah, yes, it's like how much cash would be that scale, and sort of how they got it there. That's what.
So because the Maya didn't have pack animals or wheeled vehicles, it would have likely been brought in with porters or by porters, which Dr. Silva has a lot of expertise in that. But yeah, they would have absolutely been bringing it in from, 40 kilometers on foot with a lot of volcanic ash is in fact quite intense. Even, and 40 kilometers is the closest source, if they had access to that. But yeah, it would have been brought in with porters, I'm guessing probably with basketry, or things of that nature that maybe just haven't survived in the record. We don't have epigraphic evidence of them bringing in this specific kind of material. However, Teotihuacan brought in all of their limestone for their plaster, and they have a lot of lime plaster. So that's even a heavier and even bigger feat. So, this is an important material for sure. If these Mesoamerican societies are willing to bring in material that's not so readily available. Let's do Elliot and then Dana.
Okay, so you said that the obsidian is fairly limited in the region, so just how limited is it in the collection you're working with? And is it all Pachuca, or is there greater variability?
So there is variability. So in Kruby's, when he did his analysis in 2007, he found that the highest percentage of obsidian, which made up for 8% of the total stone at the site of La Sufricaya, came from the Sierra Las Navajas source. So it was in fact Pachuca. So Pachuca is more common at La Sufricaya than the majority of other sites. Xochitlam don't see Pachuca like we do at La Sufricaya. However, at La Sufricaya, we do see a couple other sources. So to the south and southeast of Hannold, there are a couple of sources, the Ixtepeque source, the San Martin source. And so we do see these types of obsidian coming in. Now that hasn't been verified because we haven't done XRF yet on these. So all of it has been done with visual sourcing, which there are certain things that you can do, like Pachuca green, and then Ixtepeque gray with black stripes in it. So you can kind of do that. However, I would like to see XRF done in the future so we can actually verify this. Dana?
Is there a way to actually switch the protein match? See if it becomes
Yeah, so Dr. Blair, were you the one who was talking about methods for targeting very, very small things, or was it just Alex who was?
I
Talking about-
suggested that you might use FDM.
Yeah,
Infection. Fine.
Yeah.
I think so.
I can send you a paper on that.
okay,
It's a couple of different elemental methods that you could use on the infection samples to look at the chemistry of.
awesome, thank you. But as far as volcanic ash goes, I'm not sure, especially when put into ceramics, because that's what that has been done with so far. But yeah, and usually we're not able to identify even the volcanic ash macroscopically. We have to identify it microscopically because it is so small and difficult to find. I don't know, Flavia, have you heard of trying to identify volcanic ash in plaster?
Yeah, it's one we're probably bringing it down, but there's also. Actually, I was thinking, after the conversation, I was thinking an article in National Geographic on that, erupting in 1980, and everything got covered with ash.
Yep.
We probably have local sources
Mhm.
getting it from, and probably some being reported, I mean, that's the thing about seeing. And I mean, you have kind of like, I was gonna ask what the percentage of my seeing compared to good water.
Mhm.
And it seems like it's the normal pattern of over 90. Every.
Yep. Yep.
And that's probably what they're bringing in the ash, and if they use it for everything, so laminates. And the only, it's not just obsidian, right, pine, like a lot of these places, it's pine too. It's coming from the high.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of different, materials that are actually waking up from the highlands, that's probably taken.
Mhm.
So I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
And yeah, my question is, so you were saying that you guys think that the super are coming from, they're bringing up into the water? So they get me, but not me. Stupid.
Just the technique. So whether that means bringing in somebody who is an elite craft specialist with the knowledge, exactly, a mason, bringing them in, and then, actually producing them in the Maya area, likely very, very close to the site, which is why we have little production evidence like
And
tires.
Are you gonna reanalyze some of the video to see the source? Or you're
Yes.
relying on-
I really want to run XRF.
Yeah, I gotta have a vision.
Oh, yeah, no, me too. Yeah. Any other questions?
That's our, here.
We can do XRF here. In fact, we got Dr. Blair and Dr. Silver right here who are XRF aficionados. Yeah, Dr. Blair helped me run those Austin collection obsidian blades and other obsidian items that report prismatic blade cores and points. And so, yeah, it's very, it's, yeah, accessible, and also you definitely get better data than visual source.
I would have to find out. If it's actual. Yeah,
Mhm.
because I was doing that. Good, obviously.
Yeah,
There should be a
Well, you
technique.
can do it, but
Yeah, there's a technique, I'm sure, yeah.
any other questions? Well, thank you guys so much for coming.